right, so last week, we ended off on a cliffhanger. We ended off, you guys, some of you sent me some messages and said that wasn't very nice to do. If you have no idea what we're talking about, you can go back on our YouTube channel and watch last week's message. But we ended with Esther going before the king on behalf of her people to save all of them from death because they wanted to kill all of her people. She requested that they have a banquet. They went to a banquet, and then I ended there last week, and so we ended with her going to the king at this banquet, and that's where we left off. So remember, at this point right now, she knows that she passed the first test. She got the approval of the king. Now she has the king's ear to be able to ask for something and to make a choice. Now, if I'm honest with you, sometimes it's hard to make choices in life. And there are all the time in life, you're going to have to make choices between different things. Like you always have, some of you, how many of you like to watch, how many of you are Netflix binge watchers? Like you binge, all right, so we got Netflix. How many of you use Amazon Prime? Like you got Amazon Prime, all right, that you use. How many of you like just watch Hulu? Yeah, let's do Hulu. All right, what about regular TV, cable TV, anybody? Okay. So we have all of these choices when it comes to figuring out what we want to watch. And then if you're like us, then you have all of these apps already downloaded. So first of all, you got to choose between Hulu and Netflix and Amazon Prime and regular TV or Apple TV or whatever. And then you got to go in there. Then you got to decide what app. You got to decide what movie. You got to decide all this different stuff. And so there's so many choices that we have to choose between this or that. Sometimes when you go somewhere to eat, you have to choose what you want to eat. You have to choose what you want to order. All of you guys know that choices make up our life. And what we've seen from Esther is we've seen that these choices have made up life. And they've made up this existence of what is going on in mankind because life is made of choices. Now, sometimes choices are easy to make, but sometimes choices are really difficult to make. And we have to understand that sometimes when there's battles between two things that come up and that happen, and sometimes we want to make a right choice or we make a wrong choice, and sometimes it's between truth or lies. It's good versus bad. It's success versus failure. It's proud versus being humble or humility. And I was thinking about this choice of how we make a choice to live a certain way. And as we read the story of Esther, I've read this story through several times since we started this series. And I've come to the conclusion that there are two types of people that are in this story. There are proud people and there are humble people. And do you guys remember last week, I asked you to just kind of think through your life of people that you have met that have been very proud people and that have been very humble people. And when we read this, it's very interesting how God shows us the heart of who we are. How through the choices of what's happening around us, how these things can happen, and it can cause us to whether to be humble or to be someone that is very proud. And can I tell you that being proud is very dangerous. It's a very dangerous thing to be a prideful person. Because when you're a prideful person, you think that you're it. You think that you're the best. You think that everything is about you. And the Bible is very clear. It actually says in Proverbs verses 16 and 18 that pride comes before destruction and a haughty spirit before a fall. And when we're reading this, we're thinking, man, like this is a perfect verse for a man in this story named Haman, the bad guy. Haman was a very prideful man, and he thought everything was about him. This dude got so upset because some guy wouldn't bow down to him in a parade. This dude got so upset that people wouldn't acknowledge that he was second to the king. And so he said, I'm going to kill all of them and I'm going to wipe them all out. This man was a very prideful man. But see, it also says in James chapter 4, verse 10, humble yourselves in the sight of the Lord and he's going to lift you up. And this is the perfect verse that we see for Esther because Esther was humble. Esther was willing to do whatever it took to be able to get to where she needed to do on behalf of her people and doing what was right. And the end of the story here that we're going to talk about tonight really sums up prideful people and people of humility. It really shows us either we will be destroyed by our pride or our ego, or we'll be lifted up by knowing who God is. And I don't know about you, I would rather be lifted up to where God has for me than be destroyed because of my pride or ego. So when we left last week, Esther had asked the king to go to this banquet. And they were at this banquet. And we pick it up in Esther chapter 5, verse 4. It says, so Esther answered, if it pleases, let the king and Haman come today to the banquet that I prepared for him. Then the king said, bring Haman quickly. Let's do it as Esther had said. And at verse 6, it says, at the banquet of the wine, the king said, Esther, what is your petition? What is it that you need? And it shall be granted. What is your request? I will give you half of the kingdom. It shall be done. So we're at the banquet, and all of a sudden, the king's like, all right, Esther, what is it that you want? What is it that you want? I love you so much, and I care about you so much, I'm willing to give half of my kingdom up for you. Remember how big his kingdom was. His kingdom was the biggest leader of that time, and his kingdom was vast. And for him to say to her, hey, I'll give you half my kingdom, that's good. Whatever it is that you want, I'm going to give it to you because I can make it happen. If you want money, if you want fame, if you want land, whatever it is, I will give it to you. And we got to think about this banquet wasn't like a banquet like we're going to go down and have like in the park. This isn't like a banquet that probably any of us have ever been to, because remember, the king liked to throw a party, and Esther knew this. So this banquet was probably like a high-end, very expensive. If you think about like a wedding banquet, that's probably what this is. Probably had all the really fancy desserts that you don't even want to like mess up because it looks good. It probably has all of the best food, the best meat, the best mac and cheese, the best mashed potatoes, the best food that you could ever have. Why? Because Esther knew that she had to ask something of the king, and it had to be the best. And so I'm a visionary, and so when I'm thinking about this, she's in this room, there's all of this music playing, there's all of this food, all these things going on, everybody's having a good time, and they're all sitting there at this beautiful banquet table, and Esther is sitting next to the king, and the king is sitting next to Haman, and they're all there, and they're all eating, and they're all enjoying it, and then the king said, what is your request? What is it that I can do for you? And then Esther, verses 5-7, she goes, my request is this. And I can imagine that as soon as she says that, everything kind of gets quiet. Because everyone is wanting to know, why is Esther asking something of the king? So when she says, my request is, I believe that there was a hush over the room. I bet everybody was waiting to see what she had to say. And what does she say? She says, if I have found favor in the sight of the king, and if it pleases you to grant my petition, fulfill my request, then let the king and Haman come to a banquet again tomorrow night that I have for them. And I will do as the king asked. So remember last week I shared with you how I was highly annoyed with Esther? That she was trying to save the life of her people, but rather than say, hey, let's go and, can you save all my people? She decided to throw a party. She did it again. Twice in a row. She literally dragged this out, and she wouldn't ask, and she said, you know what? My request is, why don't you come back again tomorrow night and have another party? Lady, this will be my conversation with Esther. Lady, your whole entire family, your whole entire people are depending on you to ask the king to save everyone, and you want to throw another party. What is wrong with you? You ever look at someone and say that? You look at people and you're like, what is wrong? What are you thinking right now? Why are you thinking this way? What is wrong with you? Everyone that you love, their life is on the line, and you want to throw another party. And so some of us, this is what I begin to think. I've been to think, okay, maybe she's going to chicken out. Maybe she's not going to do it. Maybe she's not going to do it. Maybe she's saying, you know what? Maybe I'm not as brave as I thought I was. I'm not as tough as I thought I was. Maybe I can't do this. Maybe it would have been better for her just to not do it. But remember what I said I love about this book is the book never mentions God in the book of Esther. God is not mentioned, but God working behind the scenes is happening. And so she says, come back the next night. We'll have another party. Then I will ask what I need to ask. So the king doesn't do anything. He says, okay, we'll go ahead and do it. But there was someone else that was at that banquet that was sitting probably right near Esther, named Haman, the bad guy. In the verse 9, it says this, Haman left the palace happy, beaming, because he just had a party that was thrown in the king's honor and in his honor. But then he saw Mordecai sitting at the king's gate, and again, Mordecai was ignoring him, oblivious to him, and it infuriated him to see Mordecai like that. Haman had just been honored above any other man in the kingdom, a private banquet with the king, him, and all of the best food. He's feeling joyful. He's feeling great. He leaves. He goes out. He sees that dude again that annoys him. Mordecai sitting at the gate. And then Mordecai would not acknowledge again that Haman was of royalty. He would not acknowledge again that he was a great man. And Haman was his whole mood had just changed. Everything had just changed. I mean, I don't know if you've ever had this. Have you ever been in a really good mood and you show up somewhere and there is someone there you don't like? Okay, you could be honest and raise your hand. I wasn't asking for you to raise your hand. But you go somewhere, you're in a great mood, you're in a great mindset, you just had the time of your life, then you show up and you're like, ugh, really? They're here. Like, they are here. Why are you here? Or you show up and someone like your whole attitude changes based on something that you see. You might have just, and we actually see this a lot, especially with teenagers, because y'all emotional. You're emotional. Like you're like a roller coaster. You know, things are really good, then they're really down. They're really good, really down. Like you're at a very emotional time in your life. And there's a lot going on. And so we understand, us as leaders understand this emotional roller coaster that you go through as teenagers. And so basically we have Haman, who was going from this really excited place. Soon as he saw Mordecai, he's like, that's it. I'm done. My life's ruined. The night was ruined. It was terrible. So he goes home and he begins to talk to his wife. Remember, he's mad. He's upset. He's so bitter. So he goes home. He talks to his wife, but he also has some friends there. And check out how this conversation goes. His wife, Zeresh, and all of his friends said to him, build a gallows 75 feet high. Then first thing in the morning, speak with the king. Get him to order that Mordecai is hung on those gallows. Then after that's done, then you can happily go to dinner. And the Bible says Haman liked the idea, so he had the gallows built. Talk about getting real serious real quick. Goes home, talks to his wife. His wife's go, oh, I got an idea. Build a 75-foot gallows that you can hang him from. Are you kidding me? And I read that and I'm like, 75 feet, like what? Like 75 feet, that's pretty big. Why 75 feet? And I actually did some studying, and the gallows intended for Mordecai, it was 50 cubits high, which is about 75 feet. And Haman didn't do anything like halfway, so I'm sure he made this huge elaborate thing. And remember, this is all within like 24 hours of the first banquet dinner to what is currently going to happen. So like you left, and then all throughout the night, you're gonna have your whole team build a gallows that is 75 feet high just so that you can hang him on it. And then after he's dead, then you can go on to your little banquet, hang out, and have a good time. So there's some craziness happening right now. What's going to happen now? Because you have basically he wants to hang him first thing in the morning and then go to the banquet and be with Esther that evening. So now we have some issues that are going on, and we have some things, and I'm reading about this and I'm thinking, man, this is just messed up. Like this is like Esther better get it in gear if she wants to save Mordecai. And again, God is in control through this whole thing. Because why would God allow Haman to believe in such a lie that he would build those gallows to be able to hang that man? Remember, I talked about it last week, that when you have a prejudice against someone, it's always birthed out of a lie. And there's this prejudice that was deep within Haman's heart against Mordecai and against the Jewish people. And so this whole thing was based on a lie. And God was allowing this to happen. And you read it and you're like, this is crazy. Like, why would you allow this to happen? Why would God allow this? What is this purpose? What is going on? But remember, I read that scripture that pride goes before destruction and a haughty spirit before a fall. But then I begin to think about us and how we are sometimes. Sometimes we allow the way that people are and who they are to offend us. And we feel we don't like the way they do things, and we don't like the way that things happen. And there's this little word that we use all the time, and it's being used all the time in culture. It's being used in the church, out of the church, being used at school. And it's this word called, well, I feel disrespected. Disrespect. I feel disrespected because they aren't respecting me, and they aren't respecting who I are. But we have to understand this, that respect is something that is a gift. Respect is a gift that should be given to everyone everywhere. It doesn't matter where they're from. Respect is something that you can give to anyone anywhere at any point. Being respectful of who they are. I don't got to give you guys a lesson on respect because you know what that is. But the respect of treating people the way that Jesus treated people, the way that it was equality, the way that it was doing what was right because it was the right thing to do, the way that it was just treating people like they really mattered. And we saw we saw that Esther, she had a thing about respect, but Haman, he didn't. And so we can't let pride take control of us because pride will ultimately destroy us. When we believe that we are better than someone based on our status of who we are, based on how much money we have, based on our skin color, based on who our parents are, based on where we go to school, based on where we go up. Any of these things, if we feel like we are better than someone because of those things, then we have totally missed what it is to respect people. We totally have missed it. So we have to have this understanding that God has called us to respect everyone, everywhere. And it's a gift that we can always give to people. So in between all this happening, something is going on. Because the night closes out, everyone leaves the banquet. Haman goes home to his psychotic wife. She says, kill him. He says, that sounds like a good idea. Let's kill him in the morning. So they're over here. But then at the palace, something is happening. The king is actually awake. And it says, then that night the king could not sleep. So he commanded a book of records of the Chronicles, which meant he asked for them to bring in everything that has been happening within the city, bring them into me so that I can read them, so I can know what's going on. So when you're looking at this, and I find this part of Scripture is so cool because the king, he wanted to sleep, but he couldn't. Because his spirit was restless. There was something going on. He wasn't sure what was happening. And so he said, you know what? Bring me the history books. Bring me the books of what is going on in the city, and I will read them and find out what is going on. Because what they would love to do is kings would love to read about all of the great things that happened in their city. And everything was recorded. So anytime something great happened, it was recorded in a book, and the king had a log that he could read at any time to see what is the great things that my city has done, what is being produced, good people that are in the city. All this stuff was written down all throughout it. And the king decided to read through this, and all of a sudden, the king got to this part where there was a plot to kill him. And he was like, wait, what is this? Like a plot to kill him? And he was saved because there was a man named Mordecai who had spoiled 2 guards from wanting to kill the king because he told Esther. And he found that Mordecai was never, ever rewarded. Never rewarded for saving his life. Never rewarded. And he's like, man, this is like something's got to happen here. And so here we have this whole length of Scripture, but I'm going to paraphrase it to you. Because this is what happened. So the king's like, well, this dude saved me. I'm not sure who this man is, but he saved my life. So he calls his advisors in, all right? He calls the ones in the middle of the night. He calls them all in. He goes, hey, I got a question for all of you. He was like, what would be appropriate for the man that saved the king? What would be appropriate for someone to do for a random guy that's maybe in the city? He saved my life. What do you as advisors think should happen? And they begin to think to themselves like, oh, what would we like to see? And they said, well, I think this is what we should do. I think if it delights the king, we should take a royal robe that the king has worn, and we should place it upon the man. And then we should place a royal crown that the king has worn at some point and put it upon the man. And then we must give the robe and the man the robe, give him the crown. But then we should place him upon a horse, and we should take him throughout all of the city. And we should begin to celebrate everything that was done. And then he said, and we should proclaim to the city how great this man was. And this was done in honor of the king. That was the advice. That sounds pretty cool. Like you get to wear a king's robe, you get to wear his crown that he did, you get to ride the king's horse, you get to go through the city, and they basically, again, have a parade and celebrate you because you saved the king. And this is legit, this is great. So the king says, you know what, I love this idea, don't waste another minute, take the robe, take the horse, take the crown, and let's do this. Like, let's make this happen first thing in the morning. Now remember, the lead advisor for the king, his name was what? Haman. So Haman was the one that gave all this advice because Haman was like, oh man, yeah, I like myself. So give me the royal robe, give me the crown, give me the horse, and take me through the city, and let's celebrate me because it's about me. So middle of the night, king's up, reads the story, thinks like, wow, we haven't celebrated this man, so they decide to celebrate the man. They tell him to do all these things. All these things are going to happen. The king says, this is perfect, let's do this. And then he goes to Haman. He said, make this happen. Don't leave out a single detail. And he said, oh yes, go do this to Mordecai the Jew. Dude orders Haman to go and get Mordecai to put a crown on his head, a robe on him, put him on a horse first thing in the morning. What was supposed to happen first thing in the morning? First thing in the morning, he was supposed to be murdered by Haman. So the very man that was going to murder Mordecai is the very man now that has to parade him through the city and declare how good he is. So it says in Esther 6:14, while they were still talking with him, the king came in and hastened to bring Haman to the banquet, which Esther prepared. So they're like, all right, we got to go do this. Like a banquet's coming up, so all this thing's going to happen. But basically you have this story where now you have Haman having to take Mordecai through the whole city and celebrate how great he was. Talk about pride. Talk about pride coming before the fall. Thinking that it was all about you, that you were going to be the one, that the superstar, you were going to be the light was on you. Everyone was going to look at you. And he's like, no. It's actually for that guy. So then we move on and we move to this after the parade. Obviously no one was hung. No one was murdered. Nothing had happened. We move off to the next banquet in Esther chapter 7. So they go to the banquet and the queen answers the king. If I have found favor in your eyes, O king, if it pleases the king, give me my life and give my people their lives. See, at this point, she dropped the bomb. It just goes right in Esther chapter 7. She literally says, listen, if I have found favor in your eyes, spare my life and spare my people's lives. She said, we have been sold. We've been sold to be destroyed, and we're going to be massacred and eliminated. And if we have been sold off to slavery, I wouldn't even brought it up, and our troubles wouldn't have been worth the king. So she goes to her husband, the king, and she says, listen, I'm going to be killed. My family's going to be killed. Everyone's going to be killed. What do I do? Like, if you love me, save me. And of course, remember King Xerxes with the temper? I mean, this dude had the temper of temper. Yeah, remember him? The Bible says King Xerxes exploded in anger. Where is he? Who is he? This is monstrous. An enemy, an adversary. And Esther points across the table and says, it is that evil man, Haman. Haman was terror-stricken before the king and the queen. The king, raging, left his wine and stalked out into the palace garden. Haman stood there pleading with Esther for his life. He could see that the king was finished with him and that he was doomed. Let's stay right here. Talk about an awkward banquet. Awkward dinner conversation. Don't know if you've ever had it. A little tension at the table going on. You have Esther who just pointed to Haman and said, yep, that's the man that's going to kill me. That's the man that's going to murder me. That's the man that's going to murder all of my people who have been captured. King explodes, goes nuts, gets mad. Figures it out, left his wine glass at the table, can't even handle his anger. He runs out of the room. He's so mad. Haman is absolutely terrified. He knows he's going to die. He knows it's going to be bad. But it's really kind of crazy what happens here because you have to understand that like back then a banquet, when you were at a banquet, it wasn't like you sat at a table and you had chairs. That's not what it was. Their banquets, they got to sit more like on a low type of couch or sofa where they got to eat, and the table was more low to the ground. So they were more laying down on this thing than they were sitting at a table. It sounds weird, but it was cultural, that they would kind of lay down. And as the king came back into the palace garden, into the banquet hall, Haman was groveling at the couch where Esther was laying. The king screams out to them, "Will you even molest the queen when I am just outside?" When the word left the king's mouth, all of the blood drained from Haman's face. So now not only did the king catch you because you want to murder his wife, now he sees you literally trying to get on top of his wife. Now Haman was pleading for his wife, but it didn't look good. And he just walks back in, and homeboy is all up on the queen, which is his girl. That ain't gonna fly. Immediately, one of the eunuchs attending the king spoke up and said, "Look over there, there are the gallows that Haman built." And instantly he says, "Go hang Haman on it right now." So the very thing that Haman built to kill Mordecai is the very thing that he hung in at the end. That's how this story, I'm telling you this story, I told you the story was crazy. He hung him on the very gallows that he had built for Mordecai, and the king's anger cooled. As the story continues, God saves the Jewish people and elevates Mordecai to a position to be over them. And we understand how God works through all of this. And the story of Esther reminds us of God's wisdom and protection. When we started this sermon, we talked about pride and humility. And as we read this, we see that there are two extremes in the story. Haman being the way that he is, and Esther being the way that she is. And in Esther chapter 4, she says, if I die, I die, but I'm going to the king and I'm going to ask for my people. She was so willing to give her life for so many other people. And if that's not true humility, then what is? Someone that is willing to lay down their life for what they believe in. But yet Haman was the complete opposite. And each has its own result. Haman, in trying to get what he wanted, ended up dying anyway. Esther, in giving up of herself, was blessed and honored. And it reminded me of a verse in Mark. As I'm going to close out here, is Mark chapter 8, verse 36. It says this: "For what will it profit a man if he gains the whole world but loses his own soul?" What's interesting about this story, guys, is this story actually, it actually ends where it began, but just completely backwards. Let me explain it to you. Because we have the same king of the same city we started with in the very beginning. But no longer the Queen Vashti, but the Queen Esther. Instead of having a queen, you have a humble young Jewish girl risen to prominence. You have a proud Haman who is no longer in command, but yet you have a Jew named Mordecai who's elevated to be in command. So the same story, just reversed in a different way now. Because God will always elevate those that are humble. And as I read this story, it really connects with me on a personal level, because being proud, having pride, being proud in what you do, it's important to be proud of what you can accomplish and what you can do. But you have to be careful that being proud of what you do doesn't become something that you are prideful in what you do. Let me explain that to you. Like, you can be very proud that you got an A on a test. And you can be very proud that you studied hard and you got the good grade. That's good. Like, be proud of what you have done. But don't be prideful about it. Don't be rubbing it in other people's faces, telling them they're stupid or they're dumb or they weren't able to accomplish something that you were able to. You can have a proud moment when you hit a home run over the fence or you score the winning goal or whatever it might be. You can be very proud of that moment. But don't be prideful thinking that that makes you better than anyone else. Just recently, many of you know, I like to follow the NBA and I like to follow basketball. And not too long ago, LeBron James was doing an interview, and LeBron James said that he was the best basketball player of all time. This is what he said. He said, as I am the greatest basketball player of all time. He said this in an interview. You can go back, it's all over, you can watch it. And what was interesting to me is I began to kind of dive into it because I love basketball, I love the culture of it. And there is only one man who I will ever say is the greatest basketball player of all time, and that's Michael Jordan. And what was so interesting about this whole thing with LeBron James and Michael Jordan, LeBron James, listen to me, I want you to check how this works out. LeBron James, he said that he was the greatest basketball player of all time. All the other people that they interviewed, everyone that they asked, all the contemporaries that played basketball, everyone said that Michael Jordan was the greatest basketball player at all time. And then when they asked Michael Jordan if he was the greatest basketball player of all time, he said no. He said no. He said there are other great basketball players that came before me. And he said, I just have the privilege to be able to play with them and to be able to play with great teams. See, for Michael Jordan, it wasn't about him being the greatest. It was about his team being the greatest. Michael said what made him great was the people that were surrounded by him and the people that he played with. And that began to make me think about kind of this story when it comes to pride and how we are so desiring to be the one in the spotlight that we will push everybody else that has helped elevated us to a place where we need to be. So oftentimes we do this with God. God will do something amazing in our life, and we will let everyone know how amazing we are rather than how amazing God is. And so what we've done is we push ourselves into the spotlight when God has taken us to a place, and God takes us to this place, and all of a sudden we think that we've earned it and we think we've made it because we're the best and we're this and we're that, and we become prideful in who we are. It was interesting. I was talking to the worship team before we even started. And we were talking about worship and music and all those things. And something that I was told years ago that I never forgot is this. All of us can have a talent in some type of area, talent in maybe art, maybe a talent in sports, maybe a talent in working on certain things. But I will tell you this. Talent will only take you where character can keep you. I'm going to say that again. Talent will only take you to a place, but it's going to be your character that will keep you there. And as you read this story is amazing because we see people of pride and we see people that are humble people doing whatever we need to do to make sure that we do the right thing. And as I'm reading this and I'm thinking about this story, who do we want to be like? Obviously, we want to be like Esther. We want to be like Mordecai. They simply did what was asked of them. They humbled themselves. They were quiet. They went about their business. They obeyed God in doing what was right. And if we are just humble, God will take you to where you need to be to do what you need to do. And we have to remember that. Guys, listen to me. If you have dreams, if you have aspirations, if you have places that you want to go, be humble in your journey because God will get you to where you need to be doing what you need to do. And we see this in Esther. Esther was just obedient to hearing from God. She was obedient to doing the right thing. And as she was obedient to it, God allowed her to. And so this is the lesson of Esther. When God seems absent in your life, keep trusting in him. And he will take you and elevate you to where you need to be. He will raise you up and bring honor to you as you bring honor to him. As you elevate him, he will continue to elevate you. At the end of the story, we find out that Esther lived and the Jewish people are saved, and Mordecai is elevated to a place that he is over all of the Jewish people. And it's the end of the story is such a beautiful ending because of the way God protects everyone and God elevates everyone. And it reminds me that when you're connected with God, he will protect you, but God will also elevate you. And as he begins to elevate you, your character and your integrity will keep you at that place of elevation as you continually grow with him, and he will protect you through all of that. But you have to be humble. You can't be prideful. Let's pray. God, I thank you and praise you for these students that are here. Thank you for these leaders that are here. I thank you for the visitors that are here. God, I thank you that you're able to teach us lessons of humility, lessons of pride, and God, that you're able to show us what you want us to do and who you want us to be. And God, I pray that as we continue on our journey, as we continue to fall more in love with you each and every day, God, that we will be people that live in humility and not in pride. God, that we will know that it's not about us, but it's about you. It's about the journey that you take us on and how you're able to help us get to where we need to get to. So God, I pray that if there's students that are struggling with pride tonight, that you will remind them that you have brought them to where they are, that you have been working behind the scenes the entire time. God, I pray that as we continually journey into the next seasons and the next stories of what you have, God, that you will continually bless us, you continue to be with us. God, that you will continue to change us, challenge us, and renew us. In Jesus' name, and everybody said, amen. Then guys, the next thing we're going to be jumping into is we're going to be jumping into just another story, another series within the Bible of young people, of a young person specifically, a young guy connected to an old guy, and how God used this relationship to do something absolutely amazing. And so I want to encourage you to keep coming out. We're going to continue into a new series of characters in the Bible here in a couple of weeks. We have Easter coming up. We have some amazing things like that happening. So I want to encourage you to come and to be a part of that.